Shri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha. Agajanana Padmarkam Gajananam Aharnisham Anekadam Tam Bhaktanam Ekadantam Upasmahi. Welcome to all for this session on Ganesha Purana to chapter 80. And from the previous chapter, we are hearing the story of King Kartavirya, whose responsibility is to safeguard all the Gurukulas, safeguard all the hermitages, and supply whatever is the requirements of the sages who are performing the yajna and who are teaching the next generation. But instead of doing that, when he saw a Kamadhenu, a wishing cow that was given to sage Jamadagni by the demigods in order to take care of the needs of his hermitage. He wished to own it and he tried to snatch it away from Jamadagni. And with that, the sage became angry. The sage then said, when you are acting helpfully, you are behaving properly, but seeking the wishing cow, you are predetermining your own destruction. Truly, you are confused, O king, because you want the unobtainable, because nobody can own that wishing cow. That wishing cow was given by the demigods so that it can serve the hermitage of Jamadagni. But then this king, the ruler, he wanted to own it because it is their habit among the rulers to own anything and everything that is excellent in this world. Though we live for only few years in this world, even then, many people wanted to hold something that is non existent in this world. On your head will fall the evil that is produced, and then the triple world is destroyed. Pierced by those wordy darts, the king came to resemble the destructive cosmic fire, and from his mouth he angrily vomited the fire. In extreme anger, he then spoke to the sage Jamadagni. The king said, O rogue, I have never heard an evil word from anyone. What can I do? I have endured your acerbic speech only because you are a Brahmin. Otherwise, he would have immediately killed that particular person who is telling him what is good and what is bad. If a ruler is not ready to hear from anybody, that ruler naturally need to be considered as an evil person who is fit only to be killed. Getting up from there, the king quickly gave an order to his messengers. When you have released the wishing cow from her post, return quickly to me. So he told his people to release that wishing cow from the post to which it is bound and asked it to be dragged through his kingdom. At his command, the messengers of the king then surrounded the wishing cow, the Kamadhenu. Simply by her making the sound, they gave up their body and they all went to heaven. And with the fire of her anger, she burned the king's entire army. Other heroes flew to heaven because of the fury of a snorting breath, concealing the sun's disk so that nothing at all was perceptible. The region became dark, the sky was not bright, earth began shaking, the shaken trees fell, and the frightened soldiers ran from there in every direction. And that is what happens to an evil ruler's army. If he thinks that by the power of his army he could able to snatch anything and everything, because here the Kamadhenu, by its very the sound of fat that it is making, and by its snort it could able to kill the entire king's army, leaving him deserted in the middle of them. At a distance, someone struck the cow with a whip, and soaring up here, soaring up there, the cow chased the army as if she were a lion after a herd of elephants or Garuda after snakes. Just like the way a lion chases a herd of elephants, the cow chased the entire army of Kartavirya. A great cry of distress then came from those fleeing warriors, and Kartavirya, the great warrior, said to them, "Don't be afraid. When I joyfully blow my conch shell, she will go to her dwelling in fright. Who is this wishing cow? Look at my wonderful object." So he was under the impression that by blowing of his conch shell, like the way the other kings were feared and they were running away, in the same way, when you blow the conch shell, this cow, wishing cow, will also return to its dwelling. He then blew the huge conch shell, filling the triple world with the sound. But the wishing cow was not frightened, so all the king's servants struck her vigorously with wooden rods and clods of dirt. But from wherever she was struck in her body, there came forth many armored heroes who were fully armed. So, with the blowing of the conch shell, it was not frightened, but instead, when the king's army started beating that Kamadhenu, and from every beat, heroes have arrived from the body of that Kamadhenu, and they started killing the barbarian army of the Kritavirya, the Kshatriya. Hairy barbarians came from her hair, robbers from the area of her feet. All were produced in this way, various types of foreigners and also many other heroes, groups of horses, elephants, and very strong charioteers. They fought there with Kartavirya's soldiers, and when they struck them, Kartavirya's soldiers fell down, but like moths on a tree in the night, others assembled there, striking and killing one another. Men fell in their hundreds, and when their weapons were shattered against other weapons, they began wrestling. So the army started fighting with each other. The army that arose from the body of Kamadhenu started fighting with the army of Kartavirya. This was the situation, and when in the tumultuous battle of weapons had been lost, the sun was covered with dust, nothing belonging to oneself or another was perceptible. They still fought one another. Then, amid the sounds of hidaying, the trumpeting of elephants, roaring, and the sounds of battle drums, cymbals, and flutes, there arose a great cry of kill, kill. Such was the situation in which there occurred a huge battle between those warriors who came from the cow and the Kartavirya's charioteers, elephants, horses, and foot soldiers, and it gave nourishment to the body and flesh eaters, nourishment to the ghosts and flesh eaters, happiness to the birds and jackals, but fear to the warriors' wives on seeing the warriors being killed like anything. Some broke their knees, some their heads, but there is certainly no reckoning of swords, shields, spears, bows, arrows, warriors, and chariots which are destroyed. Those of Kartavirya's warriors who remained fell then, but the warriors who came from the cow who were pursuing them laughed and did not kill them. At that moment they derided them by saying, "Has the sage done this evil thing to you? Has the king become so stupid because of the previous transgression?" His army crushed, Kartavirya's son stood up, and in his hands he took 500 arrows and a bow. Placing his left knee on the ground and vigorously drawing the bow, he shot a dense mass of arrows into the army that had come from the cow. But like a fool's behavior or having sex with a barren woman, the king's dense mass of arrows achieved no result. The excellent king repeatedly released that number of arrows, at not one the wishing cow. not one struck the Kamadhenu, and not one could able to fell the army that was raised by the Kamadhenu. So when his dense mass of arrows proved useless, the brave king became frustrated and quite heated. He was sick with anxiety, thinking, where has my ability gone? And all those who had gone to heaven thought one shouldn't attack when confused. And the wishing cow gleefully thought, why could this battle be so easy? Because the king was filled with so much of confusion, he was on the side of the adharma, and because of that reason, all his fighting ability had simply disappeared. After the wishing cow had gone, Kartavirya went to the sage and said angrily, because after fighting the entire and destroying the entire Kartavirya's army, the cow had left the hermitage of Jamadagni and went back to its dwelling place, that's the Goloka, to the heaven it went back. After the wishing cow had gone, Kartavirya went to the sage and said angrily, O Brahmin, I am not aware of your deceit, and thinking that a man who has deceit in his mind, deceit should not be considered a Brahmin. He took one arrow and wounded the bull of Brahmins, who with a huge arrow struck in his heart. The sage Jamadagni gave up his life. Renuka, the wife of Jamadagni, then said to the king, this Brahmin killing is senseless. But the king, his red eyes filled with anger, said to her, if you do not keep silent, I will now kill you too, O sage wife. Then the evil king angrily struck her with 21 arrows. But at that moment she mentally recollected the sage Jamadagni, straight after which she said to the king, O evil Chandala, why have you committed this offense? You have struck us for no reason, so your arms will be destroyed. There is no doubt of it. The king left there after he had heard a speech, and overwhelmed with by anxiety, he departed with the remnant of his army. In his heart, he blamed himself, and he was grieving over his dead soldiers. Despondent and disheartened, he entered his own palace. Thus ends the 80th chapter of Upasana Khanda of the glorious Ganesha Purana, in which we have seen how how the king Kartavirya with his army was playing a futile battle to capture Kamadhenu. Was it ever possible? Nobody could able to own that heavenly cow. So all the army that arrived from that heavenly cow had defeated Kartavirya's human army, and then the Kartavirya, who was having angry in his heart, he went straight to sage Jamadagni and pierced arrows in his heart and killed him. And by that time, his wife Renuka, she too came there, and he struck her with 21 arrows and killed her also. And then he realized the mistake he has done, that he killed a Brahmin as well his wife. And by that time, Renuka had already cursed him, saying that all his arms will be destroyed so that he will lose all his winning capacity. Namaste Sharada Devi, Kashmira Puravasini, Twamaham Prarthaye Nityam, Vidya Danancha Dehime. Goodbye.